The city learns something is wrong the moment skill replaces goodness as the highest aim. Welcome to another story in the series From Wonder to Power, The Journey of Thought. Today I want to show you how Socrates, ethics and the question of the good confronts the consequences of a world where persuasion outruns truth. Athens has become fluent. Citizens argue well. Courts decide by speech. Education teaches influence. Man is the measure, and success belongs to those who can shape appearances. Yet beneath this confidence, a tension grows. If truth bends to perspective, on what basis does anyone claim to live well? If values are taught as techniques, what separates wisdom from cleverness, you know? This episode begins when philosophy turns back toward the human being, but in a different way than the Sophists imagined. Socrates does not ask how to win arguments or manage opinion. He asks what makes a life good, whether virtue can be reduced to skill, and whether knowing how to speak is the same as knowing how to live. Here, thought steps out of the assembly and into the soul. Ethics replaces cosmology. The central problem is no longer what exists, but how one ought to live within what exists. This is where philosophy becomes uncomfortable again. Because the question of the good cannot be delegated, sold, or mastered without examining oneself. A confident young citizen near a narrow street by the Athenian agora explains to his friends what justice is. Meletos speaks smoothly, borrowing phrases from sophists and magistrates alike. Justice, he says, is obedience to the law, or perhaps fairness among equals, or maybe the advantage of the stronger. He is not fully sure which version sounds best. The group nods. The words are polished, yet something feels empty. Well. Socrates, barefoot and unremarkable, stops as if by chance and listens. Then he asks a simple question. When the law is unjust, is obedience still justice? Meletos answers quickly. Socrates follows with another question, then another. Each reply exposes a problem in the previous one. Socrates does not correct him or offer a definition of his own. He only asks. Confidence drains into irritation, then embarrassment. What Meletos thought he knew collapses under examination. Later, a neighbor complains that Socrates enjoys humiliating people. Socrates laughs and says he knows nothing worth teaching. His task is not to fill others with knowledge, but to help them see what they do not know. Like a midwife, he assists in the birth of insight by removing false certainty. His irony lies here. He claims ignorance while revealing it in others. The discomfort this creates is not cruelty, but necessity. Without it, the soul stays asleep. Seen from above, this method changes philosophy itself. The Sophists teach how to argue persuasively. Socrates asks whether persuasion deserves belief at all. Rhetoric seeks victory. Dialogue seeks truth as an activity, not a possession. Knowledge becomes a responsibility to examine oneself. Ethics moves from theory into life. As Meletos walks away, anger fades into unease. He has not lost status, but certainty. For the first time, he senses that knowing how to speak is not the same as knowing how to live. Beneath the shade of a public fountain near the agora, a respected hoplite speaks with authority. Laches tells a group of younger men that courage means standing firm in battle, enduring fear, refusing to flee. His scars confirm his words. When Socrates asks whether courage is simply endurance, Laches agrees at once. Yet Socrates follows with a quiet question. Is endurance still courage when it drives a man blindly into danger? The pause that follows is heavy. Laches has seen such stubborn bravery end lives. His definition begins to crack. The dialogue continues without accusation. Socrates asks whether any virtue can exist without understanding. Can someone act justly without knowing what justice is? Can a person do good while mistaking harm for benefit? Laches objects that people often know the right thing and still act wrongly. Socrates shifts the frame. People always pursue what they believe will benefit them. When they choose badly, it is not because they reject the good, but because they misunderstand it. Error comes from ignorance, not from a deliberate love of wrongdoing. Nearby, Myrto listens quietly and recognizes herself in the argument. She remembers moments of confidence followed by regret, choices made with certainty but little reflection. Each failure shared the same pattern: belief without understanding. Socrates' claim feels unsettling but precise. Virtue is not obedience forced by law, nor habit trained into the body. It is insight. Without knowing what truly leads to a good life, even sincere intentions misfire. Seen from above, the provocation becomes clear. In a culture that praises honor, strength, and reputation, Socrates ties morality to knowledge. To be good is to understand. Ethics shifts inward, from imitation to examination. The central moral task is no longer compliance, but clarity of judgment. When the group disperses, Laches walks away thoughtful. His courage remains, but it feels incomplete. Myrto returns home with a new sense of responsibility. If living well depends on knowledge, then the first ethical duty is to think carefully. Right? With this move, philosophy turns decisively toward ethics, not a list of virtues, but a relentless inquiry into how one ought to live. A sunlit corner of the gymnasium fills with confident voices. Crichton, a prosperous Athenian citizen, listens as young men debate the origins of the cosmos. They argue about elements, celestial motions, distant principles that explain storms and seasons. Crichton nods, impressed, yet oddly untouched. These ideas describe the world well enough, but they offer little help with the questions that trouble his days. How to raise his sons, how to treat rivals, how to live with integrity in a city that rewards appearance over substance, you see. Socrates passes by and interrupts the discussion with a question that feels misplaced. Which of you knows how to care for his own soul? Silence follows. Someone objects that the soul cannot be observed like stars or rivers. Socrates agrees, then presses further. If the soul governs desire, judgment, and action, should it not matter more than distant elements? He does not dismiss the study of nature. He simply insists it is secondary. To understand the world while neglecting oneself is to possess tools without knowing their purpose. Later, Socrates walks with Alcibiades, brilliant and impatient, already restless with ambition. Alcibiades speaks of future power and victories. Socrates asks whether he understands justice and whether power without self-knowledge might destroy both the city and himself. The question irritates Alcibiades more than any cosmological puzzle. It reaches too close to home. For the first time, ignorance of the soul appears more dangerous than ignorance of nature. Seen from above, a decisive turn is taking place. Earlier thinkers search for the principles that order the cosmos. Socrates turns inquiry inward. Philosophy shifts from explaining what exists to examining how one ought to live. Structure gives way to meaning. The soul becomes the primary field of thought, not because nature is unimportant, but because without self-understanding, no knowledge can be used well. As evening approaches, Crichton leaves the gymnasium unsettled. The world outside remains the same. The question that now presses on him is different. The most urgent mystery is no longer the order of the heavens, but the condition of his own soul. Near the agora, a young official named Euthydemus listens as citizens pull the same law in opposite directions. One group calls it just, another cruel, a third merely useful. Each appeal sounds convincing in its own way. Euthydemus feels the strain of deciding without a standard that can hold. If justice shifts with circumstance, judgment becomes little more than choosing a side. The city seems crowded with goods, yet strangely empty of the good, you see. Socrates steps toward him and asks a question that cuts through the noise. When you say something is good, do you mean good for now, or good without qualification? Euthydemus answers quickly, then stops. Socrates presses further. Is courage still good when it leads to ruin? Is wealth good when it corrupts the soul? Is success gained through injustice truly beneficial? Each example strips away a partial good. What remains, Socrates suggests, must be something that improves the soul itself, regardless of advantage, timing, or praise. Later, Aletheia, a young listener drawn by curiosity rather than ambition, reflects on the exchange as she walks home. She recognizes the pattern in her own life. Pleasures that satisfy briefly but leave emptiness. Honors that inflate reputation while thinning character. Socrates' demand for a universal good feels severe, almost unreasonable. Yet, without such a measure, every choice becomes improvisation. Life turns into movement without direction. Seen from above, the importance of this search becomes clear. Socrates does not deny that people pursue many goods: pleasure, power, safety, recognition. He questions whether these are good in themselves or only under certain descriptions. By insisting on a universal good, he sets a new ethical standard. The good must be stable enough to guide life across situations, yet close enough to shape the soul from within. Ethics moves beyond success and persuasion toward evaluation of character itself. As night falls, Euthydemus prepares his judgment, no longer confident, but no longer blind. Aletheia pauses at her doorway, weighing her choices more carefully than before. The city remains divided, voices still clash, yet beneath the arguments, a deeper question now persists. In this search, philosophy binds itself to its hardest task: to find a good that does not change with opinion, and to measure human life against it. Something decisive has happened by the end of Socrates' questioning. Ethics is no longer about custom, success, or persuasion. It becomes a demand for clarity about the good itself. Not what works, not what wins approval, but what genuinely improves the soul. What is gained is a standard that resists convenience. If the good is universal, then neither power nor popularity can redefine it. Life becomes answerable to something higher than opinion. Moral reflection acquires depth, discipline, and seriousness. The soul is no longer managed, it is examined. What is lost is comfort. Socrates offers no ready code, no list of rules to follow. His ethics unsettle rather than reassure. To live well now requires constant questioning, self-scrutiny, and the willingness to admit ignorance. The easy refuge of convention disappears. This chapter marks a turning point. Philosophy ceases to be primarily about explaining the world or navigating society. It becomes an ethical practice. To think is to test one's life against the good. To know is to care for the soul. From here on, philosophy cannot avoid responsibility. Once the good is treated as universal, every action becomes a question, and every life a case to be examined.